Welcome, Cheryl, and thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Lise. And I want to thank everyone at Authors and Artists Festival for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here. Hello, everyone. This is my first time doing an online reading, so bear with me. So I want to start with just a very short poem from the beginning about Crazywoods. It is what we call them, those places grown back after the forest was cut down. Crazywoods, and we walk crazy among them. About this book. Everything in this book was most likely written while I was in a hypomanic state. Of course, because if I wasn't manic, I wouldn't be writing. I'd be sleeping or staring at the shower curtain, trying to remember why I should take a shower anyway. Or staring at the unfinished paintings in my studio and thinking, if I want to paint, I'll have to clear the table and get some water and take my paints and brushes out of the tote bag I used when I went to class. But I'm writing, so there's mania there. But not so much that I'm thinking too fast for my fingers or knitting 27 hats or flying around somewhere doing I don't know what the hell, trying to get away from all those people walking around in slow motion just to fucking irritate me. And I'm not in one of those mixed states where all the shades are down and I feel like shit, but I can't stand still. And I can't tell whether it's me trembling or the car vibrating and everything feels like an assault. And I'm so fucking agitated, you don't want to hear about it anyway. But you probably will. So I didn't know very much about bipolar. I knew like up and down, that's basically it. But I started getting different descriptions when I was asking, what is it? So this is called What It Is. They pretend to know. Sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down. Sometimes the blues just won't let go. The roller coaster disease. There is something about transistors. The transistors in my brain are doing their own thing. How can I hear myself at night? The radio under the pillow, transistors working, Martha and the Vandellas singing, love is like a heat wave, neurotransmitters burning in my heart. So these transmitters are transmitting too much or too little and generally fucking with the chemistry of my brain. It's not that I'm seasick, not Tigger at the top of the tree crying, I see too much and I get sick. Not like that at all. Now it's about thermostats. Apparently I don't have one. Funny, I always thought it was the law of physics. A body at rest tends to stay at rest. A body in motion tends to stay in motion. I do that superbly. But okay, if they want to talk about weather, it seems they all prefer warm, sunny days, a Southern California kind of day. I'm from the Northeast. I prefer weather, storms, a little rain on the pond, a 3-day blizzard, wind blowing leaves down sidewalks. I dream of tornadoes. But they are saying too many days of rain demands an arc, and I can't hang glide forever. I could get lost, and eventually the wind will fail. Okay, but what if I never again get to stand naked in the rain? What if I never get to be a human bird soaring on the thermals? That's the price you pay. The price for what? The price for what? Diagnosis. This shrink has done what no one else has ever done. He's taken a life history. I am not simply a depressive with an anxiety disorder. Those flights of creativity, those numinous insights, those trips to the bookstore where I find 27 books that are all somehow mystically related to each other. Those weeks when I stay up until 4 a.m. writing, playing piano, making quilts, those don't happen to depressives. They happen to people with bipolar. I know he is mistaken. Bipolar, manic depression. That's really crazy. Not respectably depressed, garden variety, everyone's on the latest SSRI, it's nothing to worry about depression. Except I can't get out of bed, or if I get out of bed, I can't shower. It's just too much work. And if I do get up and eat breakfast, I fall asleep afterwards. But there are those days I wake up, go into my studio, talk a blue street to my friends at lunch, work night after night. I barely need to sleep at all. My aches and pains are mysteriously gone. I write 40 poems in 3 weeks. I make 5 quilts in 2 months. I knit a huge hat and put it in the washing machine to felt it. It's so cool. I go to the yarn store and buy hundreds of dollars of yarn and make 2 dozen more. This could be a business. I spend afternoons figuring out the amounts of each kind of yarn I would need for each hat. Then I am sick of yarn. I put it away. I will make hats again, I tell myself, but 6 years later, the yarn is still in the cedar chest. He is medicalizing the artistic temperament, I tell my friends. I am not bipolar. I am not manic depressive. I've never driven to a casino in the middle of the night and gambled away our money. I've never fucked the football team or the girls' softball team, though I might have wanted to. Give me a little artistic license, for Christ's sake. So I'm not normal, whatever the fuck that is. I'm an artist. These things happen. So I really got into tarot cards. I had, I don't know, 27 decks, 27 became my, important number. And this is a poem about the tarot. There are over 20 decks in the maple chest. The Rider-Waite deck is the first deck I owned, the learning deck, the mother of all 20th century decks. The second deck, the round motherpiece deck with its childlike and women-centered images, is the feminist deck. I am the woman bathing in moonlight. There's the New World Tarot with wood carvings painted in jewel colors, and the Morgan Greer, one of my favorite reading decks, the one I go to for unadorned answers. The Fae Tarot with powerful fairies you've never imagined. The Quiet Houdays deck, and the Tarot of Prague, where the first golem was made, and some say still sleeps. There is the Fairy Tale Tarot, which makes me smile but tells the truth, and the Animal Lords who have the bodies of humans, the heads of beasts. The Goddess Tarot is luminous, each card a goddess. Yamanji, Kuan Yin, I become them all. And the Buddha Tarot, where I build meditations and visit 4 mountains. I have spent a lot of time choosing the right homes for these decks. Some are wrapped in silk scarves, some are in embroidered and beaded bags. One deck is in a round black box painted with lilies. A few are still in their original boxes, waiting. These are the journeys I take now, far from the witchcraft in the outside world, journeys through the cards, through dimensions where the figures in the cards talk to me, tempt me to stay longer than I should, give me gifts. I remember that when in the land of fairy, you mustn't eat or drink. You may be caught there an evening, 20 years, a lifetime in an afternoon. I spent entire days lost in the cards, laying out one spread after another, changing decks and comparing results, and time passes without my knowing. I am trying to find my life in these cards. In this card, the young man sits cross-legged on the lotus flower and plays flute for me. I breathe the music in like incense. The tall woman in purple looms over me. I look up into her distant face, but she does not speak. I join the 3 women, dancing, dancing. We are sisters, we are young. We are dancing, holding hands in the sun, in the moonlight. Beware the swords, they are all sorrow. Here is the one I fear, the nightmare card. It is the Bosque painting over the lover's bed, the heart pierced 3 times. A woman is walking toward me across a plain of swaying grass, her hand in the mane of a lion. She is all red and gold fire. She knows I want her. I spread the cards in crosses and rows, circles and pyramids. I am riding on the rim of a giant wheel. Where it stops, nobody knows. The dog is barking at the top of the stairs. The woman is floating out of her body. The man is hanging by 1 foot. I am the woman dancing drunk on the roof, too close to the edge. What's happening? It is so much easier to write about mania because with mania, there's always something happening. Who wants a story where nothing is happening? And yet, that is the reverse side of this fabric that is my life, the erotic and its opposite, the life force and the creeping death. People like to use the term downward spiral, but that is too active for depression. Mania is sometimes a dizzying, out of control spiral of agitation. Depression is the line down of desire. Crying all the time is bad, but at least it's something. You can say, geez, I'm crying all the time. I better do something about that. But depression is not doing nothing. There's this old joke about the philosophy student who asks, who am I? The answer comes back, who's asking? With depression, that who is so deeply buried, it doesn't notice that nothing's happening. It doesn't get bored and look for something to do. Oh, sweet boredom that lets us know we are alive. Jungle Road. I am driving home from night class down what my son will later call Jungle Road because of how the trees loom, the way their branches hang over the car as we drive, the calls of jays, the drones of cicadas. That is years ahead of us. Tonight, I am driving home alone. It's late. The high beams weave back and forth with the curves. The trees are dark. If I turn off the lights, I will be lost in them. I am driving fast, taking each curve way to the outside, and I come to the walls made of stone and brick that line the road just before it opens out into the bright lights of Route 20. It would be so nice to drive into that wall, that one there, the old-fashioned stone wall without mortar. I could just rip through and be done with it. But at the last minute, I turn. I think of my son, sleeping in his crib. He expects me in the morning as sure as sunrise. I turn the wheel. I come to a full stop before entering traffic. I use my blinker before turning left onto the island. I drive down the dirt road. I make it home. So there are a lot of symptoms of bipolar that nobody ever tells you about. Obviously depression, but this is something I didn't know about, and that's blackouts. And I didn't even believe in blackouts. My mother told me about how in World War II they would have blackouts. All the lights would be put out, the shades drawn. No light from inside, no light escaping to the outside. I blacked out, people would say about their drunken nights, never taking responsibility for their actions, I thought. Liars, I thought. I was certain of my memory. I could remember entire conversations verbatim. I could read Harper's Magazine lists once and recite them aloud. I could find the exact place on the exact page where I'd read something, some fact I needed, some quote I loved. Some people say they can't remember their childhoods, but I'm more like Flannery O'Connor, who said, if you've made it to age 5, you have more than enough to write about for your entire life. I can remember flashes from infancy, my grandmother's nightie, the round TV screen on our little set, rolling potatoes around on the linoleum floor. The more I remember, the more I remember. My mother, sitting at the piano crying in her silky brown maternity dress, my arm in an ice cube tray after going through the wringer on the washing machine. I have always trusted my memory. I enjoyed it when my brother read a story of mine based on stories my grandmother told about a boy named Stanley who liked to dance. I combined that story with a later Stanley, who once leaned against the telephone pole near my house and sang softly to himself, "My name is Stanley." My brother remembered that addition as part of my grandmother's story, and I was glad that it fit so seamlessly into the narrative, but also that the storytelling could fool him into remembering something that hadn't really happened. It never occurred to me that I wasn't immune from that, or that just like remembering something that hadn't happened, I might actually forget things that had. Guess who's bi? I enter it as a subject line on an email to an ex after my diagnosis. In the body of the note, I say, polar, that is. Next week, when we have lunch, she says that it doesn't surprise her. She knew something was up when I tipped over the dining room table during an argument that time. What time? What table? You don't remember that, she says. I shake my head while she tells me how in an argument with my ex-husband, I pushed the massive pine table over with all its plates and cups and silverware, books and papers, and how the cat had yelped and scattered the newspapers as it jumped off onto the sofa. I am totally silenced. This is some other person she's talking about. Who cleaned up, I ask. We both did, she says. I wonder if that's why she left me. Did I do stuff like that often? I don't even want to ask her. There's a lot I don't remember, apparently. I think of all those times people seem angry at me and I don't know why. More evidence mounts up. People tell me things I don't remember. Sometimes it flashes by, I can almost remember. Other times, nothing. Blackouts. I've been having blackouts. For most of my life, probably. I am not the person I thought I was. And if that's true, who am I? So I didn't hear voices in terms of like one person talking to me saying, Cheryl, go do this. But I did have voices in my head a lot. And this is called voices. There is nowhere that can be quiet enough because I am carrying these conversations inside my head. I don't know who they are, these voices, but they are not mine. Murmuring, murmuring, like in a theater hall before the concert begins. I strain to hear the words, but I can't. It's just an undercurrent, murmuring, murmuring, with waves that come and go. I can't write this because I'm afraid they will begin. I will have to be quiet as I whisper this to you. Sometimes the voices get louder, but no more comprehensible. It's not that they are speaking a different language, it's just that everyone is speaking at once, chattering, chattering. I remember when I realized how big the inside of my head is. The entire universe somehow fits inside. If I go to the center of my mind, the edges are infinite. So where does this echo come from? I carry the voices around for days, for weeks, for decades. I'm exhausted from listening. I try to hear what they're saying, but I can't. I never can. This is a party I can't walk away from. These guests were not invited. They are intruders. They come and go whenever they want. My mind is the crash pad. This is a party I would have liked to have been at. This is I Am in Love with Rita Moreno. We go to see West Side Story, my best friend and I. We are 12, and this is our first grown-up movie. It opens with a shot of New York City and a sharp whistle. This is real. This is a neighborhood. I am swept away by the music, the jazzy beat, the dancing down streets, under the highway, in parking garages. I will tell my parents the soundtrack is all I want for Christmas. For years, my sister and I will sing the songs, dance in the kitchen while washing dishes. On the way home, my friend tells me she is in love with Bernardo. Who do I love? I don't know. I am still dancing with the women on the roof. Our hands meet over our heads, and now my arm is around her waist. We lock eyes and walk in a circle around each other. Now we are swishing our skirts high, stamping our feet. I will be her skirt. I will be her shoes. I will be the flowers she wears in her hair, the shawl she wraps around her shoulders. I am in love with Rita Moreno. So I resisted meds. Most of us do. because we're convinced that it will take away our character. And also because hypomania is just great. I mean, it's bliss. I mean, who wants to give that up? And so we go on meds and then we go off meds because, you know, who wants to give that up? But finally, after 2 years of, after diagnosis of saying, no, I'm not going to take meds, I decided to agree to take meds. So here it is. The med that the psychiatrist, my med doc, puts me on is dangerous. It can cause a severe skin rash. If you don't get to the hospital right away, he tells me, you can die. I check my skin every few minutes. Every little itch, every discoloration. Is that new or did I imagine it? Did I always have that? Is that red blotch on my face something I should worry about? I lift up my shirt to check my belly. Isn't that where measles always starts? Maybe this rash is like measles, drawn to the heat. When I go to the bathroom, I check my thighs, my knees. I check my armpits when I put on deodorant. I don't want to die from this fucking medicine I agreed to try. I hate medicine. I don't want to take any. I told the med doc that I'm very sensitive to drugs. He said to call him if I get the slightest rash. What does the rash look like? I ask him over the phone. Do you have a rash? He asks. No, but what does it look like? Don't worry, if you have it, you'll know. It's a severe rash. You won't miss it. Remember, you have lorazepam if you get too anxious. Right. Then I'll be drugged and miss the damn rash, or see it and say, oh, that's nothing to worry about. Go to sleep and wake up dead. Why did I ever agree to take these meds? After 4 weeks with no rash, Dr. B ups the dosage. We'll go slowly with this. How are you feeling? Okay. People have stopped moving in slow-mo. That's good. I don't feel like I'm not me. Maybe a clearer me. Cheryl, meet Cheryl, he says. I don't stop cycling. I'm still far from stable, but my head is above the current. We do some terrible things to our family, some of which are not funny, but this particular one I think is pretty funny. It's called The Taster. I am pouring a glass of cranberry juice. When it's full, I'll take it out to the living room where I'll ask my husband to taste it before I drink it. It's botulism I'm afraid of. It can kill you in 24 hours. Clostridium botulinum. It's everywhere. It's a miracle more people don't die from it, but luckily it's anaerobic. It thrives in oxygen-free environments. It also doesn't survive high temperatures, so boiling will kill it. People get it mostly from home canned vegetables, but last week in Indiana, a family died from eating a can of mushrooms from the supermarket. I remember eating mushrooms from the can when my mother made pizza on Saturdays when I was a kid. Now it creeps me out. Now I only eat fresh mushrooms, which my mother is afraid of because, well, they're mushrooms. I try to avoid food that comes in cans. No more tuna, no more baked beans, no more canned soups, no more peaches, pears, no more kernel corn. But I have to drink cranberry juice. I have to drink cranberry juice because I've been having UTIs and cranberry juice is antibacterial. I've considered boiling it first, but that might destroy whatever it is I'm drinking it for. My husband has to taste it before I'll drink it. At first, I just invite him to have a glass of juice with me. But the truth is he doesn't much like cranberry juice. Why do you want me to have juice when I don't want it? Finally, I tell him, I'm afraid to drink it, afraid of botulism. No amount of talk will make the fear go away. I've drunk cranberry juice without having him drink some with me, and here's what happens. As soon as I drink it, I start thinking, maybe this is the one batch that's got botulism in it. No one ever thought people would get botulism from those supermarket mushrooms, and they did. So maybe I'll get botulism from this cranberry juice. That's crazy, I tell myself, but I start checking for symptoms. It doesn't matter if other people aren't seeing my symptoms. They're not inside my body. What do they know? They say I'm fine, but I am not fine. I'm waiting for the inevitable pain, the cramping muscles, the loss of breath. I'm gonna die. Really? I know there's no botulism in the cranberry juice. I wouldn't ask him to drink it if I thought it would kill him. No, I need him to drink it with me so that when the panic comes, I can look at him and see he's not dying. Because if he's not, I'm probably not either. I made a lot of plans when I was hypomanic. This is one of them, my bookstore. When I sit down at the breakfast table, I am revved by a new idea. I think I'm going to open a bookstore, I tell my daughter-in-law. I'm tired of all those corporate bookstores that have bought out all the indies, and there's no place to browse poetry or native lit or LGBTQ or women's or multicultural or really good kids' books. Are you sure about this? She asks. It's a big thing, starting a business. I love books and I love bookstores, and I know I can do this. We'll have poetry readings, music, storytelling for kids, and an evening program for adults. I am busy planning the menu for the cafe. But you haven't got out of bed for 3 weeks, she says. I brush it aside. It's all a thing of the past. And Marcy worries all day. When Chris gets home, she tells him, your mother wants to open a bookstore. She can't get out of bed for 3 weeks, and now she's working on a floor plan. She's not going to open a bookstore, he says. She's been talking about it all day. She's serious about this, Marcy says. You should see how enthusiastic she is. I know, he says, but don't worry about it. She'll forget about it by tomorrow. And I do. So I kept going back to the diagnosis over and over again because that moment of being diagnosed with a major mental illness is like a really difficult one. So this one is called Yates. He spends the first 2 sessions taking a history of my life, my family. He is cold and precise. I feel like a bug under a glass. He is counting every hair, every facet of my eyes, the number of legs and the veining of wings. He can classify me as beetle, wasp, dragonfly. He classifies me as bipolar. He is wrong, he is wrong, he is wrong. Not only that, but he sees others in my family who are probably bipolar too. My grandfather, my brother, and the cousins who've actually been diagnosed bipolar or schizophrenic. But I'm not like them, I say. I don't drink. I don't use drugs. Well, not since college anyway. He tells me a story about the poet Yeats, whose daughter was institutionalized, how he told Jung, the famous psychologist, that he couldn't understand it. She is drowning, Jung told him, in the water you are swimming in. Do you understand, he asks me? They are self-medicating because they are drowning. You are swimming. Up north, the swirling waters of the Pemi have carved a basin in the granite rock. What does it mean to swim in a whirlpool? I'm sorry, I really ruined that. What does it mean to swim in a whirlpool? Okay, so I want to have time for us to have questions. I have till noon, I think, right?
Until
Lise?
12:15.
Okay, great. So one of the things that people with bipolar have regrets about, the thing we have most often in common, is not having been able to have a career and not having any money, because it just really wreaks havoc with working. Although plenty of us work, we don't end up like in one job, and we don't, a lot of times, we just don't have the careers we might have had if we had been diagnosed and medicated earlier. So this is just a short piece called When You Can't Keep a Job. When you can't keep a job, when panic attacks send you to the restroom several times a day, when people spritzing their desks with Windex or talking loud or walking by enrage you, when someone moves your Kleenex box and you feel attacked, when you rearrange the entire accounts payable files according to some new system only you can see the merits of, when the lights hurt your eyes and you put on sunglasses, when you bang your fist on the time clock, when you throw off your apron during lunch rush and walk cursing through the restaurant on your way out the door, when you hesitate, when you forget your train of thought, when your students ask you if you're okay, when you know you're not okay, when you try to do your best but cannot. I have a series of pieces in here called Crazy Talk, and it's not me talking, it's all the therapists and people I've been to in the health professions. And this is one of the last of those before I actually found a therapist who was wonderful. This is called Crazy Talk Lonely. This therapist likes to ask if I ever feel lonely. You spend a lot of time alone, she says. Yes, but when I'm writing, I don't feel alone. Well, when do you feel lonely, she asks. At parties, I say. At parties and the middle of cities. So what do you do then when you feel lonely, she asks. I go into the woods, I say. I find a brook or a pond and sit on a log or a stump. Yes, she says. She shakes her head impatiently. But you're still alone, she says. Alone? I'm never alone in the woods. She doesn't believe me. She sees the woods as a world of objects, what she calls a romanticized landscape. She doesn't see it as a peopled world. The maples, oaks, birches, the cattails and reeds, the fish and beavers, the chipmunks, the ants, dragonflies, the deer, bear, even the mosquitoes, all people, all of us together. How could I possibly be lonely here? She shakes her head. I'm resisting, she tells me. I'm avoiding the subject. How can she ever help me heal when she won't listen to what heals me? I have all these carefully marked, but when you do this, you never can find the page that you want, or at least I can't. Okay. So this is about another symptom that I didn't know or expect was part of bipolar. It's called wet ashes. I'm in the closet, hunting for the source of the smell. Something smells like wet ashes. I am sniffing sneakers on my knees, looking in corners, not knowing what I might find. My nose gets tired and I quit for the moment. What smells like wet ashes except wet ashes? Outside the closet, the floor is strewn with shoes and clothes, towels, blankets, hats. It's very frustrating. Maybe the cat walked through ashes outdoors and brought the smell inside. I walk downstairs for a cup of tea. Tea always helps. I turn on the stove, grab a tea bag from the tin, and the smell hits me again. Wet ashes. I open and sniff the tin. Nope, just tea. But the smell of wet ashes is strong in the kitchen, stronger than it is upstairs. And now I'm under the sink, moving Windex and rubber gloves, dishwashing detergent, spray bottles and bleach, dried up sponges. Nothing wet, no smoky carbon smell. I never find the source, although it comes back frequently. I go down to the cellar, search around our old furnace, but it is warm and dry. The old soapstone sink has a spider web, but the faucet isn't leaking. Then I notice there's laundry on the floor. Something in the pile might be the problem. I start sorting and sniffing, and then the smell is gone. In fact, I can't smell anything. My nose is shut down. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and smell it. I can't believe it is so strong that it wakes me up. This damn house is haunted with the smell of wet ashes. My husband says he can't smell it, but he can't smell anything. What I need is my son here. He's got a nose like mine. I talk to him on the phone. What can make a smell like wet ashes? I ask him. Wet ashes, he says. Very funny, I say. I don't know, Ma. It's midnight. Go to sleep. I was sleeping. The smell woke me up. It's probably nothing. It'll be gone in the morning. What if there's a fire someplace? There's no fire, Ma. That wouldn't smell wet. Maybe you were dreaming. Go back to sleep. I go back to bed. My husband is snoring. I imagine him a fireman, but they shower at the station. Even firefighters don't bring home the smell of wet ashes. I hate not knowing. It's like walking into the kitchen in the morning and smelling something rotten. The first thing you have to do is hunt down the bad onion, the lone potato you left in the bin. Wet ashes follows me around for years. No matter how hard I hunt, I never find the source. I wear people out talking about it. I can't smell it, Ma. It's in your imagination. I guess I know when I'm smelling wet ashes, I tell him. In my mid-50s, I tell my therapist about it in passing. Do you know there are olfactory hallucinations, she asks me, smells that aren't really there. It's very common in people with bipolar. Some people get them with migraines. Maybe the shrink is wrong. Maybe wet ashes is the smell of the passion going out of my marriage, the cold remains of love and anger. It might be a hallucination, but here's the thing. When I leave the marriage, the smell of wet ashes goes away. And so there are things that, heal me, and part of that is ceremony, and part of that is friends and family who support me, and part of that is therapy, and part of that is drugs. And I want to read this because it's an important moment, I think, in my healing process. It's called Giving Myself to Beauty. They are talking on the radio about Cape Cod National Seashore. And I'm remembering the beaches in September, empty of crowds, the white sand, the gulls, the terns and sandpipers, the cedar maple swamp trail where blueberry bushes grow over your head, the cranberry bog where you have to dodge the poison ivy, the sea turtles by the side of the road, the dunes and the marsh grasses, and the light that Barry Lopez compared to Arctic light, beyond bright. The National Park Service is going to replace the roads that wind through the dunes and grasses with straight 4-lane roads. The little roads are part of the charm, part of what makes the Cape special in the first place, one voice argues. I love those little roads on the Cape that wind naturally with the land, the turns and rises, pitch pines and grasses, and dunes all around until suddenly you're at the sea. On the radio, another voice says, but 4-lane roads are standard for national parks. After a while, I can't listen anymore. The ugly makers, the destroyers. It is not enough that they cut the forest down to feed the glass factory and created this desert of dunes. Most people think it's natural because the land heals, adapts, transforms itself, and becomes another kind of beauty. Still, these dunes are blowing away. Every year, people plant young pines that hold the sand with their roots, but it is slow going. And now, with Earth's temperature rising, this place will soon be reclaimed by sea. I hear the voices waging paper wars against the land. I decide there is nothing more important than giving myself to beauty. When I was first going to therapy, I had a therapist who suggested that I meditate, but I was so anxious that I couldn't meditate. I would just go into a panic attack. So this is much later during the healing process when finally I was able to meditate. It's called The Fern. I count my breaths and feel the connection from womb to earth. I follow each breath. It's flowing and receding like the waves on a beach. Thoughts flow through me like clear water and disappear. I have no desire to pursue them. I don't have to follow any road. I am breathing from my hara, from my belly, from my womb. I sit breathing with gratitude, with the knowledge that my truest self is unfolding like fiddleheads in the marsh. I don't have to do anything to speed them along. They will unfold until they become themselves. And the last piece I want to read is called Stigma. So even after meds and therapy and healing and many years of stability, this is the reality of having a mental illness. Stigma. There will never be a time when it doesn't matter. It will always be there. No one will ever forget. Everyone else will be allowed to have moods, behave badly, act crazy even, but I will not. Anything I do is a symptom, and it will always be that way. Even people I love will question, scrutinize any behavior. If I cry or laugh or show anger or fear, if I am excited or enthusiastic, if I am sad or disgusted or disappointed, if I stay up all night or work in my PJs at noon, there will always be the question, is she crazy again? Even if someone else is volatile, unstable, irritable, agitated, maybe they say God talks to them. Maybe they believe in conspiracies or that the earth is flat. They can rant, they can raise their voices, they can slam the doors of the kitchen cabinets. Their laughter can fill the restaurant. They can throw a punch in a bar. They have not been diagnosed, so they do not have a mental illness. They are not crazy. Anyone could say anything about me and they would be right. It would be my word against theirs. And my word can't be trusted because you never know. You never know because remember that time? That was before I was on meds, before I went to therapy for 10 years. I'm not that way anymore. I can see it in their faces. They are not convinced. I could be off my meds. I have a mental illness. I am crazy forever. Thank you very much. I look forward to any comments or questions you might have.
Yay! 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 I'm sorry that there was no applause, or we need to have like a snapping fingers button or something.
Yeah,
So
that would be great.
so that we could have a little soundtrack that would come on. You'd realize that we were all here yelling and screaming where we are. Thanks so much for that.
Thanks, Jupong Lin.
So do you want me to read you the questions?
Yes, thank you, Liz.
Okay. From one listener, she says, my mother was bipolar and this really hits home, she says. So I just thought you should know there are people touched by this illness in the
Good. I'm glad. I didn't have a chance to say that. Part of the reason, or most of the reason I wrote this book is because the book I needed wasn't there. I mean, all I knew was high, low, it's a mood disorder. I had no idea about the reality of it or the other things that were components of the illness. So I'm glad if it made some sense to you.
Another poet asks, your poetry is so insightful and honest. Did you notice a difference in your writing from before versus after your diagnosis or being on medication?
No, I think poetry has always been the place where I feel like I have to be honest. I mean, we have to, please people in so many parts of our life. My art has always been the place where I won't do that. So I read mostly the more poetry pieces because of the time constraints, but there are chapters that are prose and that are longer. But I think that having been a poet really helped me with language and really helped me to sort of I hope give the feeling of some of the things I'm talking about.
Okay, so here's a question that fits with both you and Paul. Someone asks that you are both writing about hearing voices, and Paul also included lines about voices still talking in my head. Interesting that both of you express this from different angles, this inner sounding, and she would like to hear both of you read a line from the poem that mentions the voices again and comment on how the poems do or do not satisfy expressions of voice in the head. A little complicated, but if you want to go for it, there's a question.
What's that?
You go first, Paul.
Oh, you want me to go first? Okay,
Yeah.
I'm just going to try to see if I can find the poem. I think it was the 10-line poem. First off, I guess it becomes a question of, thanks so much, Cheryl, for in terms of what you were honest and what you were talking about. And I just sort of feel that in general, our medical or how we deal with people and what we think about gets into this idea of, oh, you hear voices, you're schizophrenic, or you must be crazy, and there's all kinds of what do you want to call them, religions or signs that people think about, that people have heard a voice or hear. Are you talking to yourself? Are you hearing it from, you think, the higher powers that are talking to you? Where is the voice coming from? And everyone has different things, and some feel as, yes, it can be a quote disease or harmful, or not, doesn't let you fit into the society the way the society wants to run, because many people are very functional, and there's all kinds of lines of what voice you think you're hearing, or voices. So I just wanted to say that. And so I'm always thinking about that because I'm watching things, and the poem was about, I've never seen the answers. The voices in my head talk to me about other things, because this was a poem about the various prompts and where do you get your information, I guess. So that's where I'll just answer it like that. I think that it runs through a lot of my pieces. And I actually have a whole series called The Main Character, in which I feel like we're all the main character, and the voices we each are speaking, hopefully, are speaking to each of us.
Okay, I want to say that I draw a very clear distinction between voices that I have in my head or that I hear that do not seem to have anything to do with illness, and are things that I think everybody has happened, and those things that I see as part of the illness. So this constant chattering in my head that I had no control over, that I couldn't really hear what was going on, this to me, like, this is illness. This is not anything I can access. This is not anything that's helpful, that's giving me anything except being a distraction from my life. As opposed to occasionally, for example, I'll hear my mother just say my name. I don't think there's anything weird or that's part of an illness. I think people have that happen, where an ancestor or somebody might just say their name. I don't have anyone saying, go slit your wrist or something like that. And there have been times when I have, heard birds sing and feel, waking up in the morning to sort of the chattering of birds and feel like it's language. Like I don't quite know the language, but I can hear it as language. And those things seem very normal to me. And as a poet, there's sort of the madness of poets. That's a madness that I court, but that's not bipolar. Bipolar is an illness. For me, it doesn't give you anything. It takes away. Except I will say, for those moments of hypomania that are glorious, but are they worth everything else? And I had to say, for me, no. And also, if you are untreated and you get to be in your 50s or whatever, and you haven't had any treatment, the hypomania gets less and less, and the depression gets more and more. So it's like, how many days of depression are you willing to trade for how many days of bliss? And I don't know. I mean, everybody makes their own decision on that.
Great. So another poet says, I love the poem about beauty and would love to hear a little more context.
I'm Abenaki, I'm Native, so our sense of beauty is also, it's about harmony, it's about balance. And I didn't read some of the context because they were longer pieces or difficult pieces to, I think, listen to aloud. But I really started understanding the illness in terms of, for example, stillness and movement and balance and imbalance, and as part of the process of becoming human. So in the sense of that, also, it's like there's all this stuff. And right now, of course, in the midst of the pandemic, you know, all the stuff we're dealing with, Black Lives Matter, all the stuff that we're dealing with. I think all of us ask, what is it that I can contribute? And as an artist, listening to that particular conversation, and I think in some ways, always, I have to say, what I contribute has to come from my art. And so to give myself to that, to give myself to beauty, to give myself to the making of art is the most important thing. And I think ultimately also the most important thing in some ways in maintaining that stability that I'm trying to do in my life.
Great. So another poet quotes the ugly makers. That's exactly it. So lovely work about the beach, she says.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It is a beautiful place.
Let's take a look at the open questions. Could you talk more about navigating the distance between your values as a Native woman and Eurocentric, I think she means mainstream healthcare, addressed in Crazy Talk, where you and a therapist have a completely different worldview around nature?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a really important question because, you know, there's this cognitive dissonance or cultural dissonance that goes on. And getting well doesn't mean assimilating into someone else's culture. The thing about bipolar is it's been documented, you know, for a couple of thousand years in cultures all over the world, and it basically manifests in the same way. So I don't think that it is culture bound in that way, but how we heal is. And I have to say that, you know, what happened for me is that I had a few different things going on. I was taking the meds, which got me to a certain like level of being stable enough to then do the healing things I needed to do. So some of that was finding the right therapist that I, you know, who respected and if not understood, at least respected where I was coming from. And the other part of that was doing ceremony. And I do have a couple of chapters on that. So I was doing things like within my own culture that also like work to balance. But I want to say it was not only about that kind of cultural difference, but I had you know, went to a therapist who said that my relationships with women were too intense. So I couldn't, she wasn't someone I could come out to. So, you know, like there are people who are homophobic who are doing therapy, which is hard for me to even understand how that can still be true. So it takes a lot. You have to get to a place of a certain amount of stability in order to find the right people to work with. And that's very difficult because by definition, you're like not in a stable place to do that. So, but thank you for that question, Diane.
I have a question.
Like Paul Richmond has a question.
Sure.
So it's great in terms of this, your book, just listening to everything. Have your children read it? And has it allowed there to be more humor when you start to say something that they want to say, no, that's not going to happen, or don't worry about that, yet you're worried about it? I know that with my parents, when I was taking care of them for about 2 years, some things came up and we tried to turn it into, okay, here's for both of us, and yet acknowledge that it wasn't going to go anywhere, but we both knew where we were.
Yeah, well, my son has been totally involved in the writing of this book with me, as far as he has read every chapter. We've had big discussions about things. And what happened early on in the process for us was basically I went through this period of feeling like I had to make amends because there were all these things I had done, many of which I hadn't realized. but also like, I didn't read a chapter on being a bad mother, but I feel like there were times when I was a very bad mother because of this illness. So my being able to ask forgiveness from him and him being able to forgive me, but also to say, Mom, you have to stop asking for forgiveness. You had an illness. And so really through the whole process of this, writing this book and having these conversations, I feel like we're closer than we have ever been. So that's, I couldn't have done this without my son.
Okay, it looks like we've come to the end of the questions on the Q&A.
Okay.
Do you want to share a final passage with us or some words
Oh.
of wisdom?
Oh, let's see. I don't want to give away the ending, you know. That's the only thing. But I will read this, I guess, little piece. I can't actually find one to read. So I guess what I want to say is, there's a sort of movement out there right now saying that you don't need meds and you should just, tough it out, and the medical establishment is terrible and all that. And what I want to say is I think that's very irresponsible. I lost decades of my life because I didn't know that this was an illness. And I want to say also that when you're in it, you don't know that. I mean, some of the things that happened, I feel like, I went to Clark University. It's a psychology school. I have 30 hours in psychology. I should have known, but you don't, because you're the one that you're within it, and it all looks like normal somehow. I mean, not the depression perhaps, but a lot of the things that go on, you just, your perceptions are a certain way. So I just want to actively say that I think that there's a way to work with the medical system, and still have some control over that. You don't have to do everything they say. You don't have to take every drug they suggest, but there's a way to getting to a place of stability where then you can work, sort of work with this as a chronic illness, taking charge of it in that way rather than having it be in charge of you. So.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Cheryl, for being with us. It's been an honor to have you here. And I want people to know that Cheryl's book launch will be on Sunday, June 21st at 1 p.m. And there's a link to the book launch on the Authors and Artists website and also Cheryl's website. And there'll be a chance for a more in-depth discussion because the format of this, webinar is a little bit more hierarchical than the book launch will be. So please come to that for more discussion. And thank you so much, Cheryl, for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me. It's really great to have been here. And thank you, everyone.